I got a chronic Lyme diagnosis with multiple co-infections, rheumatoid arthritis, POTS diagnosis. One doctor was like, you're a walking pulmonary embolism waiting to happen. If I could do disease and illness so well, then maybe I was powerful enough to do my life in a different way. That for me was my mind change moment.
Heather McKean is a thought leader in the neurobiology of trauma, chronic illness, and disease.
It takes a lot of work to successfully create a negative outcome over and over and over and over again. Let's shift to power. It's already within you. It's always been there.
Hey guys, I miss creating my own content from the days before I started podcasting. So I started a personal channel where I just share my own thoughts, my personal experiences, and teachings. Follow me here.
Heather, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Melissa. I appreciate it.
Of course, I've been looking forward to this for so long. I'm so glad that we finally get to do it. And I'd love to start by asking you to share the nutshell version of who is Heather McKean and what do you do?
Wow, that's a great question. Let me nutshell it. I am who am I? Oh, what a question. I think for the purpose of professionally, I help people and to rewire painful, traumatic memories subconsciously, because the subconscious mind runs 95% of what we do, our thoughts, actions, reactions every day. So I help people rewire anything in there that may be not particularly serving them now, though it may have served them as a child. And I did not anticipate doing this for a living. This was not my objective, not what I thought my job was going to be, but it really was birthed out of my own experience with chronic illness and mental illness and a lot of different things where I just was not finding help or solutions anywhere else. So that's really what's brought me to this. I'm also a wife and a mother and have 4 horses and a dog and
amazing.
Yes, so all those fun things too. But outside of that professionally, yeah, that's who I am. I've authored a few books and run retreats and do a lot of fun stuff. But really, my tagline of my first book is I'm trying to change the world one mind at a time.
I love that. That's exactly what you're doing with your mind change method, which we will get into later on. But right now, could you take us back to when you were younger and you were struggling with all of these chronic health issues? And could you share with us how that progressed in your life? How did you end up having all these chronic health issues and what were you dealing with?
Yeah, so it's quite a story. It's quite a journey. I kind of usually start where it was around 2012 and I was at home on an IV drip. And I was in liver and kidney failure, and the doctors really had gotten to the point where they're like, hey, we've done everything we can right now. It's just, whether her body's going to push through this last time. And, I had a lot of support medically, everything at this point, but my body was just shutting down left and right. Disease after disease after disease was being diagnosed. It was really unbelievable. If I hadn't been there myself, I would be like, really though? But yes, it was really that way. And so that's kind of where it ended up to that degree. There was talk of getting our affairs in order. Like my husband, I had 2 very young kids at the time. I think 2 and 4 were the ages of my girls at the time. So, kind of backing up how I got to that point it was just incrementally, it felt like. I never really had felt like a sick person. I had a lot of things growing up, but they were my normal. So I didn't really think anything about that. I felt very able-bodied, did a lot of stuff, but I'd have chronic infections. I would get sick all the time, strep throat, tonsillitis, every sort of flu, every sort of everything that could happen. I would get that. Broke a lot of bones. And then at around age 16 is when I started gaining some mental health diagnoses. I was diagnosed manic depressive, bipolar when I was 16. But that was not also very strange. That was kind of my family did that. Multiple people in my family, in fact, this is more my mom's side, were on different antidepressants and benzos and, all sorts of different things, opiates that you could think of. So that wasn't abnormal either for me, that was sort of where I was going. I think fast forward into when I got married, I had gotten a couple diagnoses. I was doing at that point chronic fatigue syndrome, endometriosis, had multiple surgeries for that. And I had gotten celiac disease diagnosis. And so this was all before I got married. And it was really then when I got married and started to try to have children, dealt with a lot of infertility issues, that it started to kick up more and more and more. And then I had finally, through lots of help and different things, finally had my first child. And then it seemed to exacerbate everything further. Had my second child, and that's when everything really started to spiral. That's when I went very downhill, was having multiple diagnoses kind of piled on. That's where I got a chronic Lyme diagnosis with multiple co-infections and rheumatoid arthritis and so many things, POTS diagnosis, and all of these other kind of random things that would keep coming up. So I know now what I didn't know then was me having my children was the further catalyst for my body to be like, you need to deal with this stuff. You need to deal. And I wouldn't even had known what that meant had someone really face-to-face said this to me at that point. But what I needed to deal with was trauma, was things from my history, things from my past, even things that I considered normal, which were normal to me, that weren't normal for a human's nervous system, ideally. And so that's kind of how I got to that point. And yeah, again, I had a spine surgeon and I was doing a lot of different degenerative disc disease, ankylosing spondylosis, and I had to have my spine fused, and all these different things were going on at the time, where I also had a Lyme doctor and an endocrinologist and the cardiologist. And my entire life was doctor appointments, mitigating treatments, whatever type of treatments for various symptoms, and then also supplement regimens and medicine regimens. At that point, I was on 180 different things, not 180 different things. But when you counted everything up that I took in a day, it was 180 things. And so it's no wonder my liver and kidneys were shutting down. And that doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that's what was really going on with my liver and kidneys at that point, that it was all the medicine that I was being given to get well, not only wasn't getting me well, but my body was shutting down, was just going to be done with that. So that's a little bit about my health journey. And I had tried you hear the story. I tried everything. I tried every route possible, Western. I even went into what I thought at the time was kind of like woo-woo stuff. I tried energy work. I tried a lot of different stuff, and yoga and Pilates. And I just was getting worse and worse and worse and worse up until that particular point.
Wow. I can only imagine the hopelessness that you must have felt in that situation with all these diagnoses piling on top of each other, and you've tried so many things and nothing is working. How did that affect you mentally?
Most of my life, I struggled with fatigue. I was so tired just 2 short years ago that I couldn't even sit on the couch to watch a movie with my family on the weekend. And then I discovered Carrie Bennett's teachings on quantum and circadian biology. In just a short couple of weeks of implementing super simple steps like temperature therapy, red light therapy, getting outside and active, grounding my feet to the earth, My energy levels completely transformed and have held steady for the past 2 years. Not only that, but my mental health improved as I connected deeply to nature. And I was set on a new life path to give myself in service to healing of the planet and of humanity's relationship with the planet, healing ourselves in the process. I am so excited to welcome Carrie into my membership to share this vital information with you. Join us Monday, November 18th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for a live workshop followed by a live Q&A with Carrie on the topic of quantum reset basics. Find the link right here in the description and pinned comment. Now back to the show.
Well, I really did a lot of interesting mental stuff to myself at that point. There was a part of me that thought somehow I had deserved this, that I was, based on mistakes I had made or things in my past or just, a little bit of the framework from my upbringing. Well, I probably deserve this. I had a religious affiliation at the time too, and I used that to beat myself up so much of I'm being taught a lesson and I'm just not learning my lesson. And so it was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of blame happening within myself about this condition. And so it did get to the point where I was in so much pain, chronic, unrelenting pain, that I think that was from the fibromyalgia diagnosis and also a lot of stuff going on with my spine at the time, where I was not able to get out of bed by myself. And even from my husband to carry me from the bed to the bathroom, to use the bathroom, it was excruciating and I would just scream. And I thought that it was really around that point that I was like, there's no point in me being here. There's no reason for me to exist in this much pain. If this is all that I have to look forward to, then I didn't really feel suicidal, but I thought this isn't livable. This isn't continuable in this pain. So I really can't continue to go on living if this is the way that it's going to be. So definitely my mental health. And at this time I have 2 little children at home. So it was quite a mind trip and a mind mess. Amidst my body falling apart, my mind really was not doing well in the process either, I think, as one would expect.
Right. So tell us about the moment or moments when everything changed for you.
Yeah. So again, the desperation of myself and so many of my doctors, it's easy to sometimes vilify the medical system. And I do think there's a lot of brokenness within our current system. But the doctors really were like feeling for me and wanted me to get well and just felt like they didn't know what else to do. So I had one particular doctor who would make visits to my home, would come to my home because at that point it was too difficult for me to get up and out. And so when he came to my home, and at this point, this is after I'd been at home on the IV drip, he was like, listen, I don't we've tried everything. He's like, I've never done this. I don't really know a lot about it, but have you ever heard of tapping? And I was like, nope. And he's like, I don't really know a lot about it, but I've just had some people that I've heard talking about it, and maybe you should look it up. So I was like, okay, let me look this up. So I, get onto Google and I get tapping, and the first thing I find is the Ortners and their tapping solution, I believe is what it's called. And so I listened to a little bit of that, and I was like, so what you're telling me, and what I know now, what I didn't know then, is they do EFT, which is the emotional freedom technique. And so I wasn't really fully catching on. It sounded like they were saying there was trapped emotion or energies in your body. And I was like, okay, I guess, whatever. And they were like, from trauma in your past. I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay, trauma, been there, done that. And then they were like, so then all you do is, you tap, 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 and this pain, all these different ways, and everything like that through all your traumas. And I was like, through all my traumas, I'm going to die sick. Like, that's not going to work for me. But what I will say was that did open up my mind to something I hadn't tried before, which was more of a mind-body connection. So then I dove down that rabbit hole and I found this, it was an offshoot of EFT. And I found this kind of thing. And I actually, at this stage where the doctor was like, I mean, the one doctor was like, you're a walking pulmonary embolism waiting to happen. And she's like, but I can't tell you not to fly and not to go try to get help. And so packed up all everything, my food, the little bit of food I could eat at the time, because I had done all the food allergies and restrictions and everything, it follows a pretty predictable course once you get involved in all of that. So all my medication, all my food, and I went and sat to hear a little bit about this, idea around mind-body connection. And there was a lot in that. Looking back, I'm like, how did I sit through some of what this individual was saying? It was a bit of an unhealed healer situation. But what I did catch and what was so interesting to me was that I might be doing this. I might have something to do with this. And for whatever reason, I was ready to hear that. I had not been ready to hear that for years prior. I had one particular Lyme doctor that was like, this is all in your head. And you hear a lot of that in the chronic illness, say, this is in your head, this is in your head. And the way that I took that before was really through the lens of shame and blame and everything like that. For whatever reason, at this point, when it was being said that there might be things that happen to us that then our body and our mind start doing these things, and that's what you're out of alignment. And so this is your part in it. You have a part in that. Because up until that point, I had felt like a complete victim to all of these things. This was being done to me. And of course it was, because this is the way my life is. And this has always been the way that it is. And this always happens to me and my family. And I had a very strong victim mindset. And so, but didn't know it at the time. And maybe have punched someone in the face had they told me that. So I heard that and I was like, oh my goodness. Something then followed that sentence up in my head with, well, if you're powerful enough to create all these diseases and some that you had never heard of before. I had gotten diagnosed with some rare form of malaria that you can only find in Africa. Had I been to Africa? Not at that point, but was it showing up in my blood? Yes, it was. So I was like, if I can do these things so well, my Lyme doctor was like, you've got the most co-infections I've ever seen in a patient. You get that award. And I was like, these are not the kind of awards that I really want to be collecting, right? But if I could do disease and illness so well, then maybe I was powerful enough to do my life in a different way. And I kid you not, Melissa, that was the time. That for me was my mind change moment. Now, was I healed in that moment? You might be able to say yes, because my mind then got power and it broke something in there that gave me enough light to shine through to say, wait, I might be able to do this differently. And when that occurred, it just really, I felt this like shift in me that, okay, let's shift to power instead. And that was the beginning of the journey. So that's the moment that everything changed. Now, did all my pain go away in that very moment? No. Did all my disease go away in that very moment? No. But something happened in my mind enough that it was like, okay, there's an answer. And it isn't outside of me. It's actually inside of me. And that changed everything.
Amazing. Okay, so now I have to know a little bit more about your journey. So you had this amazing mind change moment where you realized I could create a completely different reality for myself. But your body didn't necessarily respond fully in that moment. So was it more of a process? And could you share a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I kind of dove first into this offshoot EFT thing, and it was a tapping thing. So you get through all the tapping, and it was really the opening of that door for me was the understanding of trauma and how it wires our brain. Now, I didn't understand it on a neurobiological level because that's not the environment that I was in at the time, is the learning to that degree. But I was getting that there must be a connection there. And so through that and through this, I really, again, just dove in and I was like, I'm all in for this. I'm going to do this. So I started working on myself a lot through this process and came home from this little workshop that I had gone to. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to heal. And so I worked on myself a lot with the tools that I had at the time, which were tapping. And so I did, to some degree, I did that every day. And within 3 months, I had titrated off of the majority of my meds. I was on such serious heavy duty medications. The side effects were unbelievable. It was like blindness and, the problems forever in your system, your digestive system, and you could death, and all these different things. So I had to titrate responsibly off of a lot of these medications. So the doctors worked with me with this, which I was so grateful for. I think that, and I had luckily attracted doctors that once I decided to get well, were willing to support me on that as well. So I went ahead and was working. So within 3 months, there was only one medication or two medications, I think, left that I only had a couple of weeks left to I was on teeny tiny doses at that point. And so I was like, I'm well. And I kept saying that and speaking that to people like, I'm well, I'm healed, I'm well. And my body's just catching up. My body's just catching up. So I did that. And then a couple months later, I was even better off all meds, so much better. I was working out. I was like, my whole world had changed. The thing that I needed to dig deeper into was my health took a huge shift and a huge change, and so many different things changed. Relationships changed, a lot changed for me. But I was still doing the particular offshoot of EFT that I was involved in unfortunately, it was a really toxic environment with the person that was sort of the leader of that movement. And I realized, like, this is what got me sick in the first place, was this environment is mimicking my childhood environment. And so though I was dealing with things physically, not a lot of my deeper programming was being touched by tap, 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 tap. Like, it just wasn't getting into that really deep programming. It was helping shift power back into me, and that I had some sort of agency to shift, pain, to shift my emotional states at the time. And that was brilliant. And that was good. And I didn't know I had that power before. So I do think so much that, modality and that learning. But after a while, I realized, people around in that community that had been around for a while were getting sick again. Doing things were coming up again. There was a lot of toxic behaviors. And I sort of stepped back and I'm like, wait a minute, this is contributing factors. Like, when we work with people, when we work on ourselves, we're getting into these contributing factors that are creating disease in our bodies. And this is the kind of environment that a lot of us come from. And it's being recreated in this place with kind of what I like to now call an unhealed healer, someone who had shifted more to the focus of money and power versus healing. So once that realization came to me, I was like, nope, I'm out, because I need to invest in my wellness journey, and this is not contributing. So it took me a little bit I was a little disoriented by that, because again, my whole deal is, I need to put the power back in myself. And I realized that a lot of us had been putting power into the modality or the person that had created this modality. I was like, okay, that's not a healthy concept. So I pulled out and I was like, something's missing. Something's missing at getting into that deeper programming. And something's missing because people really can have a lot of wonderful initial quick change, but it didn't seem to be lasting. And it didn't seem to be getting deep enough for that lasting change and to change the kind of programming that was allowing the creation or the maintaining of toxic environments. So I was like, I need more study on this. So at that point, I just pulled out and I dove deep into everything else that had contributed to my learning up to that point. So I studied NLP and I studied hypnosis and some of these other closely related things to the EFT. And then I went back to, let me just go back to EFT. There's something there. What can we take from EFT and what can we take from NLP and what can we take from DNRS and what, all of these different things. And I was like, this is all good. Something's still missing. And I realized that there was something with the brain component. I was like, there's something with our mind. And so I was like, I need to study neuroscience. I feel like I need to understand the brain. And I had no prior training, nothing like that. But I just dove into that. And I spent a couple of years just getting as much information as I could about the way our brain works, the way we input memory, what happens once it's inside of the brain, how we then retrieve the memories. And that to me was like, oh, this is the missing piece. And I found that I can read research papers and that I can put these things together. And it was sort of connecting some intellectual pieces for me that I had not ever really pursued as a young person. So it was great. Ended up taking a neurobiology course at Harvard through their online program. So nothing special. It wasn't like I was a Harvard grad there, but that's when everything came together. So when I got all the pieces of sort of, the mind body, even some of the energy medicines, some of those kind of things mixed with the neuroscience, I was like, oh my gosh, I know why this works. I know why it works when it works. And I know why it doesn't when it doesn't. And I know how to put together something that should work for everybody every time. Because there's no fuss. It's the way the brain works. It's the way humans were designed to have things put in and how to have them retrieved. And we have all of the mechanisms, we were born with them, that enable us to change those memories, because we change memory all the time. We do it naturally. And so once we can have some intentionality about that, and we know that, and the power can come back into our hands, oh my goodness, then there's no stopping you, what you're able to do. Then I did that and I wrote Mind Change. I was like, I don't care if it helps one person, I don't care. I want to put all this information out there. I want it to be for free. The cost of a book, So I put it out there and I was like, okay, I'm done. That's my contribution to the world. And then people read it. People got a hold of it and they read it. And then more people started coming in and more people wanted help. And things just sort of blew up from that point. Then working with tons of clients at that point, I had to train some other people because I was like, this is too many people for me to try to help. So then focused on training other people. So then had to create courses and more stuff just out of the need that arose. Then I realized a piece that I had been missing personally, even in all of my research, was more of I'll just tell you, it was the moment. I always say nothing happens in the body without the brain's permission. Never, nothing. So that really puts a lot of emphasis on our brain and the processes of the brain to create any of the things that we're creating, right? So I was very, very brain heavy. And then I got into helping birthing clients. One of my very close friends, Ellen Fisher, she was like, do you think this could help with, labor and delivery and pain and childbirth? And I was like, I know it works on every other pain we've ever tried. Why not? So we tried this with her, and it was amazing. And there's lots of stories out there about that. Then I started getting a lot of birthing clients. Then I was like, I know nothing about birth, even though I've had my own children. I had traumatic experiences with my own births, which made sense because I didn't know what I know now. So I studied to be a doula. And it was in that process that I, through like neonate development, I realized that the heart beats before the brain is formed. And I was like, oh no, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. There's another piece here. There is some other piece. If our heart has the power to beat first, before our brain tells it can, I've missed something. And so I dove back deep in, and that's where I found heart math. I'm not sure if you're familiar with heart math.
Yeah.
And so I dove in and got certified with heart math and everything. And that helped create some missing pieces, even in our work and in the mind change method. Of some people represent a little bit more somatically in their body, and some people that the in is going to be more through the body than it is the mind. And for other people, it's the other way around. And I just wanted us to be able to, us as mind change, meet people wherever they're at. So that was a great piece, heart math. And then I got into polyvagal theory, and then really, really dove into that, and then some of the somatic experiencing stuff as well. So I feel like at this point, I think we've checked all the boxes of any way that someone can do a problem. And we've been very, very successful at helping people pretty much with any problem they have, not just chronic illness, but all sorts of things, addiction and relationship issues and all just mental health, tons of mental health stuff. It really works for anything because it's working with the way that we were designed. So yeah, that's where we're at now.
Wow.
Long stories.
What a journey. Okay, so I want to go over the methods that you mentioned here. So there's the people that are more brain oriented, the people who are more body oriented, and then you mentioned polyvagal theory. Is that something separate?
So there's been a traditional thing of a top-down approach or bottom-up approach. Now, back in the way that they used to talk about that, the top-down approach was more of your talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy approach, and which I think we all know doesn't work. Even the people who do it know it really is limited, and I've stacks of research papers. By the way, I don't say that just opinion-based. It's really research-based. We're failing our entire world from a mental health standpoint. The tools that we have not really been working. So that idea of a top-down approach wasn't really working either. But then you've got the bottom-up approach, which meant people doing, this is where I'm sure you've read Bessel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps Score.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that. It's amazing. It's such a brilliant work until you get to the end where it's like, so what do you do about all of this? And it's like art and yoga and, it's like meditation. Man, I'm telling you, if that stuff worked just by going and doing it, more people would be well. There's a missing piece. And so that's where I was like, okay, that's what the bottom up approaches in the past have been. Anything more body-based, somatic, trying to create wellness from a body perspective only. So I think that there's really more of a middle ground approach, which I call the holistic approach. And that's really understanding we are not just brain, we are not just body, we are brain, body, heart. And really heart more even meaning if we're going to look back at the way that that's been represented for centuries, is more of the soul, spirit, whatever. There's another component to us that is, you can call it energy. I mean, you call it energy, soul, spirit. It's the thing that is more intrinsically us than any of the fleshy part. But all of this works together. And if you leave a part out, there isn't going to be whole healing. It will find its way out. It'll find its way to communicate. And that's the way that I think about it now, is that if my body is doing something physically, some sort of symptom, sort of something, it's communication. It's always communication. And so all of that blame, shame, and nonsense that wasn't really helping me before, now my body is for me, and my mind is for me, and my heart is for me, and they always have been. And it's just figuring out how to translate those messages they've always been saying and sending, but that we're never taught to listen to. In fact, most of us are taught the opposite, not to listen, not to trust our intuition and our gut. We do that to our children, that our heart is the touchy, feely, emotional. It's just your emotions, like don't go by emotions. Or that our head, that we're overthinking, or we rely on too much logic. There's fault in every part of it. It really needs to be considered all together. And when they speak all together in the way that we were meant to process information, that's when everything's like, oh, this makes complete sense. And it's for us. And the power's back inside of us instead of outside of us, where that's when things get a little wonky.
Right. Okay. So I have a couple of questions about this. Let's take, for example, somebody who may be in the boat of understanding the mind-body connection. Maybe they've had that aha moment that, oh, I really do have the power to create something different. This was me many years ago when I was first introduced to this information. And I had some miraculous healings through coming into a place of just believing that this is already real in my body. But then I'd come up against something else that I couldn't seem to shift no matter how hard I try. And I think this is probably pretty common for people. What is something that somebody may be missing in that equation?
Yes, so that's your subconscious programming. That's the what we don't understand is how much 95% of what we think, and that creates all sorts of filters. So we think we're existing in the world in this way, and that everything around us is reality. And I'm not trying to get existential here, but it's a reality created by immense amounts of filters that are our subconscious programming. Have you seen Inside Out?
Yes.
And Inside Out 2?
I have not seen it yet, but my kids keep begging me.
You really should see it. It's so much more for adults, I think, than kids, because it's actually quite accurate. It's really quite accurate when they are talking about the way that we end up making the decisions we make and the thoughts that we think and the way we perceive that other people are responding or treating us. Completely filters, completely driven by our interpretation of experiences that have happened to us. So yeah, of course, people go through, we have our moment of like, oh my gosh, I am in power. But then we're surrounded by people that we've brought into our lives who were on the same script that we were. Like there was a reason we worked together. And you're pulled right back into all of your confirmation bias, everything else going around. That it's very difficult to shift those things if we don't have an awareness that it's the way we're seeing them, the way we're perceiving them, that's I don't even think it's actually a problem. It just is, but that's what's going on. If there's a problem, the problem is in the way that we're usually perceiving something. So it doesn't mean there's not toxic people out there or people who behave badly. Mostly it's just people hurting people, but our letting it in and having some sort of reaction in our body is us doing it. So what I would say to those people is you need to experience the shift of something, of a program. You need to experience the shift of a subconscious experience or memory so that you can see that also is in your hands. Because then so the way that I live my life now, which I love to say, we call it the mind change method, but it's really not a method. It's more of it's like learning how to work with us as human beings. It's like the handbook to our programming. You're being given that. And when you realize like, oh, this is what's wrong, is the perception. And then we bring it back in and we get curious about, this is super interesting. I'm sure this comes from somewhere. I'm not just making this up. And we've got the tools that we give within the book. They're quite easy to really work with. But then you're able to kind of start to see like, oh my goodness, this isn't even about the fact that he didn't do the dishes or the fact that this person said this thing to me that triggered me. Like, that's not what this is about. This is about me. And so now anytime I have a trigger, I don't really love that because it doesn't feel real for me that much anymore. But if I have some sort of uncomfortable feeling, or I have some sort of what I like to call like interesting response to something, then I know, oh, that's mine. That's mine. And I go in and I figure that out, and I cannot figure it out from my head because it's really my body so much, and my heart, and what my gut has been saying, and what's just in my subconscious mind. Now, this is where it gets just a tad bit tricky because our subconscious mind is sort of like our internal hardware of our phone or our laptop or something. Like, it's not easily accessible, and nor should it be, because of how much it does. And we don't want to get in there and start playing with it willy-nilly. So it's tricky, and it has a specific language that it uses. It's not trying to be tricky, but it has it speaks more in code, more like in metaphor. That's why when something happens, our body speaks up, is because that's the communication. The brain's like telling it to the body, and the body does this thing. We've just never been given the Rosetta Stone, if you will, to the mind-body connection. I wouldn't even say that's true, because way back in the beginning of all of this, people understood that it was more of an internal condition rather than like, wait, is it something you ate, or is it because you were missing some sort of pill that they need to give you? Like, that was original. Hippocrates knew that what happened to us happened inside of us and would create things in particular parts of our body as messages. So this is old knowledge. I love people always be like, this is new age stuff. It is so old that it couldn't even possibly be new age. It's very, very, very old information that we've lost contact with. And so I like to say sometimes, like, I'm a translator for that kind of information.
I love that. So is there a way that people can get in and communicate with their subconscious mind?
So consciously, it's very difficult. And that's good. That's us working well, actually. So there's nothing wrong with us. That's us working well. I think over time, so I'll just more share what I experienced. In the beginning, I worked on things more consciously through the tapping and stuff like that. That's more of I'm consciously aware that there's a problem, and I'm going to have some sort of agency to shift that to shift my state to something different. Right? And that's good. That's empowering. That's very helpful. When it gets into the deeper subconscious programming, oftentimes in the beginning, we need help. It's like, for instance, if my MacBook, which it currently is a little bit on the fritz, I am going to take it to the Mac store or the Apple store, right? Because I could crack it open and I could poke around at things. I'm probably only going to mess it up more. But what I will say is I can take it to the Apple store. They know how to get in. They're experts at that to figure out what's going on inside of it that's creating the fact that it won't turn on. So that's a little bit like us. So you want someone a little bit more skilled at how to get into the subconscious mind. And what has happened with me and a lot of clients over the years is the more that you do that, and the more that you create a safety between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind, the more it opens your lines of communication. So over time, you do have a little bit more access to your subconscious programming because you've built plenty of trust, plenty of skill over time that you handle it in a way that serves you. Because your subconscious mind doesn't mess around. It's what does all of your automatic stuff. It regulates your digestion, your breathing, the temperature of your body. Like, it's keeping you alive. That's its main job. It's not going to mess around with all this like woo-woo stuff if actually it's not doing better, if it's not creating something that serves you better than what it's doing currently. So over time with this method, what I've realized about myself and with other clients and people that have been doing this for a long time is, yes, we now do self-work that is much, much, much deeper than subconsciously than the work we would have initially been doing self-work wise, which was a lot more of a conscious approach to subconscious programming. But when you work with a trained practitioner, it trains your brain. Like our brain, the whole neuroplasticity thing, what that's trying to tell us is the brain can still learn. It still can do new things, especially if what we're trying to teach it is more the way that it was designed to function. That's when it's like ideal, right? And so we're doing that when you work with a trained practitioner. We're getting in, we're helping make those connections subconsciously, which you won't be aware of until you're conscious. And then we're not hypnotizing people. There's nothing like that happening, but it's putting you in a state of safety where you're able to go into that more programmed way of communicating, responding, putting you back into those experiences, because our brain doesn't know the difference between happening now, real. If it's happening inside of us, it's real. So we can put you back in a memory from being 5 years old. And if you're deeply subconscious, that's real happening to you right then. So it's in the subconscious mind where those big, amazing, life-altering, trajectory-altering changes happen. But the other thing about mind change is we've never wanted it to be like you or have to be reliant on the program or, God forbid, a person. I am not a magician. It's not Heather McKean. Please no. We want to put the power back into people's hands so that you're able to do this on your own, but be amidst a community who, when your MacBook won't turn on, you've got someone to go to be like, hey, can you just help me with this? And in the meantime, you've learned so much that you can sit and watch over their shoulder a little bit. And it's deeper learning for you too. And be like, oh yeah, no. Oh no, I know what that piece is. Yes, that. Yep. And you learn more and more and more. So you become a lot more user-friendly and a lot more educated in the workings of who you are and your mind and what's stored there. And again, we have a little bit more sovereignty over what is put in there, because when you're young, people are putting in all sorts of stuff. You have no say in that. No say, because you're young and that is when we're truly in a victimized state. Not that we're being victimized, but we only have victim mentality because we are reliant on other people to stay alive. But as adults, we can shift out of that and have a little bit more sovereignty about what got planted in there and how it is representing itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing for a lot of people. I think that they get programmed so young. Like, I think for myself, I was programmed so young that I can't even access all those memories, but I can see the programming playing out over and over and over. And then it's just like, okay, how do I break this? How do I change this?
Yes. And we're given there's a way. I call it pattern interrupt. There's a lot of different science out there on how that works, but it's really because all information in our bodies is on a feedback loop, basically. And so it's like a CD, a record, if you're as old as I am, then you scratch a track on that enough times and you won't be able to get it to play. The memory is stored in that same way. The storing of it and the retrieval of it happens in a feedback loop. And if we can interrupt that feedback loop enough times, it becomes actually programmable. And so we can put something different there instead. You get to decide that. We don't just go putting willy-nilly things in people's heads. And that's how the whole process works. So that's really the key. That's the magic, if there is any, to all of this, is just working with the way that our brain works. You interrupt the feedback loop. And you're a mother. Yes. You already know this then. If one of your children falls down, scrapes a knee, bumps something, slams a finger in the door, whatever, our instant kind of thing is like, if we can get them to focus on something else, here's a lollipop, or or if you can get them to laugh, not bypassing their pain, that's a whole other thing. But like in the moment, if they can shift out of that for a second, when they come back into it, it's not as bad as it was. We know that with kids, we do it all the time. I mean, the lollipop thing is probably not the best thing. It gets them figured out with sugar, but we know it's in us to want to get a chuckle out of somebody when you see that they're spiraling, or, someone's like intent on being upset and something funny happens. You do see the smile just cracks a little bit. They're not going to go back to the same state that they were in before. That's the way we were designed to be. We're not ever meant to stay in an emotion, a reaction, a mindset that is creating negative chemicals within our body. But we just weren't given that information. And so we produce a lot of they're not bad hormones. They're not even bad chemicals. But when we're in these feedback loops that we don't even realize that we're in subconsciously, we're producing mass amounts of stress chemicals and stress hormones in our body. That's why we're so tired. That's why sometimes we're very sick in various ways. It's because of the feedback loops that are happening in our mind subconsciously, and we can change them. And the beauty of this stuff, Melissa, is that you don't have to work so hard. It's not habit formation. It isn't like, and practice and journal and talk about it. If you change the way something was input, then the output is different, right? Like if my phone came programmed to the search engine of Google, but I go in and I remove Google and I put Chrome in, I'm probably revealing how tech savvy I am because they may be the same thing, but I'm just, bear with me for this. Then if I do that, then when I flip my phone on the next day, is it going to show up Google or is it going to show up Chrome? Chrome. It should. Yes, absolutely. If I did all the programming correctly, right? Or if someone else did that. If I removed Google and downloaded Chrome, Chrome should pop up. Do I have to try? Do I have to install it again every day and practice it and how to open it? No, it was programmed in. Open my phone. There it is. Pops open. And that's the way that's the way that this stuff can work. And I will say, to some degree, it's bad for business because people come in with a problem, something really hard, and then it changes. And oftentimes they're like, it wasn't that big of a deal anyway. It's not really, and I never really was like that. I love it.
Forget?
Yeah, not even just forget, it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I love to tell this story about this guy. He's one of our apprentices in training and everything. Anyway, he's fantastic and wonderful. He came in, and he originally came in it was a grief recovery specialist and everything, but was still dealing with a ton of heavy stuff about his divorce. And so anyway, he came in, he watched his wife transform a lot of health conditions, and he was like, okay, well, maybe let me give this a try. So he comes in, and as often happens with clients, you get in thinking you're going to work on one thing and it ends up working on all these other things. So cleaned up all this stuff with the divorce and all this undealt with grief, and gets into some worthiness patterns and some self, love issues. And again, it goes there often, let's just say. But through this whole process, he got deeply involved in mind change, and he started doing his own work and everything. So he had a massive public speaking fear, hated it, didn't ever want to do it. He would get physical reactions and everything from doing it. And then through the work, he started being able to speak in front of people, and then ended up, of course, as does happen often, ended up attracting a situation in where he actually was invited to speak quite often. And so it was funny. One morning he got up, he was preparing for this speech that he was going to do. And he was like, and she was like, are you feeling nervous? How are you feeling? Are you feeling prepared? And he was like, I mean, yeah, of course I feel prepared. I always meant to be a public speaker. This was always what I was meant to be. And she was like, are you kidding? And he was like, no, I always knew I would be a public speaker. And she was like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. Like, you did not. You hated it. You said that you were born to never get up in front of people. And he was like, oh, yeah, well, not anymore. So,
Wow.
yeah, I know he tells the story much better, but it's one I like to tell because it's quite common that people forget. It's kind of like if I really choose to go in and put Chrome on my phone, I know it's a silly example, but and I feel like Chrome performs so much better. I'm not every day going back and going, well, it's a good thing Google's not here. It's a good thing Google's not here. Like every single day. I mean, I could do it that way, but I'm going to eventually start dumping on Chrome for some reason, right? So I'm just like, great, Chrome. I don't even think about it. It's like search. I'm more into my search than I am what the search engine was about. And that's so much for us. A lot of us are going off of programs we don't even know are there. And that's our mode of operation. That's our programmed search engine, if you will. So then everything we search gets filtered through that particular thing of you're not good enough, or you have to work hard for love, or, you're only valued as much as you can help people, or, there's a ton of different core beliefs that really, shape the way that people filter almost every information that they get. And you're just going about your life thinking things are hard in this way or that way, and don't realize it's the program. It's the program that's filtering every experience that you have. So you may be in a really different life than you think you are when you take off the filters.
That's a deep thought. I would really like to share a personal experience that I had with your method, if you're okay with that.
Oh, I love it. That's perfect.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
So for anyone listening, Heather puts out her method, or maybe not the full method that you're doing, but you put out a lot of information in your book. Mm-hmm. I was going through a really rough period a few years back with my physical and mental health, and I've had chronic health conditions since I was a teenager. And a lot of the memories of things that happened to me are suppressed and I cannot access them. But I was thinking to myself, is there anything that I can remember? One of the issues that I dealt with my entire adult life was chronic fatigue. And I realized that that was rooted in something in my childhood where something happened that made me feel weak and overwhelmed physically. And I pinned it back to a memory of when I was a baby and I was in this bright room and I was miserable because I was sick. Like I had a sore throat and I was miserable and I just wanted to be held and comforted and to feel better. And of course, no judgment of we all understand this, but my parents were busy and my mom was working in the kitchen and I was just being a baby that was miserable. And that was like a core memory for me. So I tried the method that you lay out in your book, the pattern interrupt method. And I changed that memory so that now the room was dimly lit and my mom picked me up and held me and was singing me a lullaby. When I think back on that memory, yeah, I can still remember the old memory, but it's so dim. I don't feel it in my body anymore and it doesn't really have a hold on me. But I can feel the piece of that new memory that I created. And interestingly enough, shortly after I did that, things aligned in my life so that I ran across some information, quantum health and circadian biology information that completely transformed my energy level. And I do not deal with fatigue anymore.
That is fantastic. Thank you for sharing. That's as easy as it can be. Yes, that's it. And so I hear the pushback already because I've heard it before. Someone's like, well, you're just telling yourself stories that aren't real to make yourself feel better. Did your mother ever pick you up?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Of course. Did she ever sing you a lullaby?
All the time.
Yeah. So it's just in that moment, we don't know if that memory is real in the sense of, or if it's a representation that your brain created. It doesn't matter because if it's happening in your brain, it's real. So it's real that you still have somewhere on some level, that baby is there, when you were previously thinking this and feeling these things. needing somebody to be there. And you gave her her mom. And that's not make believe, because mom was there and could have been there. And for some people who's like, no, my mother couldn't have done that and wasn't there, or I was abandoned, or I was adopted, or whatever. So very often we're dealing in the very, what we think is concrete now reality without realizing there are so many other things happening. And let's say that if you're in that situation, that your mother wouldn't have picked you up and she was a drug addict or whatever, that we can get in and deal with those things too. That if she was probably hurt. There's probably good reason she was using drugs. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean we're trying to make excuses for anybody. But if we can understand that, then we can if we clear all that for a moment, and she sees her little baby laying there and is in pain, what is she going to want to do? She's going to pick that baby right up. And we give people that, something that they may have never felt like they actually had. But that's because remember, everyone's living in this reality of perception. So if their mom had the opportunity to have all of her stuff cleared, then we see this in people all the time. We know that person's just going to go to love. They're going to just operate right out of love. They're going to do that. We're just designed that way. And so we're able to help people even who might be like, well, that isn't real for me. And like you said, nobody was there telling you what to do different. Your mom picked you up and sung a lullaby to you. Right? That's your brain. Your brain is doing that. It knows what to do. It knows how to care for you and what it needs. And we just often need to give it the space to do so. So thank you for sharing. I love that. That's beautiful. I love to hear these stories.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for putting the information out there. I actually got your book on Audible and I binged read. I stayed up all night and listened to it on like double speed.
I'm sorry. That version of the Audible version is so bad and it's going to be re-recorded. So I understand if you're out there like, I can't even, it's a very bad recording, but it's going to get worked on. I just finished the second edition of Mind Change. It's going to be all re-recorded. But even through a bad recording and through all of that, you still got the changes that you did. So I think that's amazing. Just goes to show you the information's solid.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I would love to give you a chance to share about the Mind Change method, where people can find it, where people can find you. And then also if you could give like a couple practical takeaways for people who watch this podcast and how they can start to implement some of this information.
Absolutely. So we're really easy to find on any social platform. We're just at Mind Change. So we're on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all of that fun stuff. I think even on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. So that's easy to find us. Also, I think a great source of absolutely free information where you can hear tons of stories and get tons of insight and help. We have the Mind Change podcast. So that's on any podcasting platform that you can find, or just go to our website, mindchange.com, and there's an entire section with all of the podcast episodes there as well. So we're really easy to find. We have lots and lots of information. I feel like we have, and this has been the goal, at any entry point that you may find yourself at, we've got a level for that. So if you're just like, I don't know, this sounds like I'm a little bit curious, but I'm not sure. I'm really skeptical. Totally fine. Read the book or listen to the podcast. Maybe the podcast is the no cost, all you have to do is just listen you can watch it on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel as well, or listen to it free. There's no commitment whatsoever. If you want to know the science behind it and the fact that I have researched the dickens out of this information, then get the book. Because I also give you a lot of other books to read to support the information and support your growth. But I also reference every place I got any of this information. So if you want to know where I picked up any of this information, it is in the book. Back to its original source. Sometimes, anyway, I'm not going to, the original kind of thing that I was involved with, he claimed a lot of the information and I thought it was his, but a little bit more research showed me like, oh, that's not his quote at all. That's not his information at all. That goes prior to him. So I sourced everything from the original place that it was found. So all of that is in the book. And then for people who are like, I'm all in, there's private sessions that you can book online with practitioners. And that's a great place to start. Although I love when people have read the book and they come in because they kind of understand like what we're doing, at least have some framework around it. So you can do one-on-one sessions. Then then we've got courses. So the online course, module 1, is like mind change on steroids for all the information. We walk you through everything. Some people are a little bit more that way of geared to learn. So it's direct to camera. We give exercises. Then you're part of the entire community where you can practice with other people. So there's a lot of support. We do live mentoring calls. And the online courses come with 2 sessions with a practitioner too. So that's kind of a good place. And then for people who are like, I want my whole life to change tomorrow, we have retreats, private intensive retreats, and also group retreats we rent an island in Belize, and they are extraordinary, magical, like there's just not words for how people come out of these experiences. They're really amazing. So whatever level you may find yourself in, I feel like we've got an entry point for you that's very low commitment. And then takeaways I would love for people to walk away with is we've not met a problem yet that hasn't been able to be, shifted. Like there's hope. There's hope if you are chronically ill. There's hope if you've got mental health diagnoses. There's hope if you're in addiction and you've gone to treatment center after treatment center after treatment center. Like there's hope. That's the biggest takeaway. And the second one would be, I think the thing that changed my mind was that you're in so much more power than you think. It takes a lot of work to successfully create a negative outcome over and over and over and over again. It takes an enormous amount of energy to first formulate chronic illness, but then to maintain it, or to maintain addiction, or to maintain a relationship issue. It takes an enormous amount of energy. So you are powerful regardless. Regardless, you're powerful. So do you want to be powerful and using an enormous amount of energy to keep creating the life that you say you're unhappy with? Or could we divert that energy into something different? And you could start living a life that's really intentional and one that you may want. And I'd say third, if anything, is it's easier than you may think. I put a lot of science in because I'm heavy on research. I like things to be well researched. But you don't have to know a single thing about the way your brain works. You really don't. You don't have to know anything about psychology or somatic work or anything. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. If you know you have a problem and you want to feel better, that's all you need to know. So we don't have to overthink it. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It can be that user-friendly for people who might be like, I don't really care about all the stuff that you're talking about. I just want to feel better, or I want this thing to go away, or I want to do better in this way. So I think those are the takeaways that I would love for people to just consider.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to wrap this up by asking you 3 short questions that I ask all my viewers. So first of all, what is your deepest passion?
Boy, I mean, it would have to be this. It would have to be mind change, because it changes everything. So my biggest passion is helping put power back into people's hands and lives.
What is your highest joy?
So I'm really split between, because I have horses and I love them and they have huge heart coherence and they heal in a way that is different. So there is like this peace and joy that comes with just being present with the horses. But there's this other piece of joy, which is freedom. When you see someone set free, from something that they didn't think they could ever be set free from. The look on their faces, the way that the breaths that they take, that first sort of free breath, like, oh, there's nothing like that. That's amazing.
And finally, if you could give one message to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
You have the power to heal, to change. It's already within you. It's always been there.
Thank you so much, Heather. This has been amazing.
Melissa, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for, supporting getting this information out there.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcasts. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.